everybody. My name is Maria, and on behalf of Authority Magazine, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome with us today Chef Kathy. Hello, Chef Kathy. Chef Kathy is the star of the new food documentaries, Chef Dynasty, House of Fang, which recently premiered on the Food Network as well as Discovery Plus. And before we dive in and you tell us more about the show, I'll let you tell our listeners and our readers a little bit more about what got you into food and cooking, what inspired you to be where you are today.
Yes, and first of all, thank you for having me. It's very exciting to be talking to you in Authority Magazine. Huge honor. So I'll dive right in. How did I get into this whole industry? Well, my parents, Peter and Lily, they opened House of Nanking when I was 7 years old. The restaurant now has become a San Francisco legacy and institution. Highly successful restaurant that's been around for over 34 years at this point.
Congratulations.
And so I basically grew up there. That was my daycare. Back in those days, there were no such thing as devices. There were no iPads, cell phones. And so I didn't really have very much to do. A restaurant's not really a place that's good for kids. It's not like I could set up a play area. And so all I could do was color. And when that was done, I would try to talk to the customers. I would just try to help out in the restaurant, not get in the way. And that's where I learned a lot of restaurant life. When I first started, it was kind of like just wiping tables and bussing tables, getting drinks. Then at an early age, I started becoming very interested in food. I always enjoyed eating, right, and talking about food, but growing up around my dad, cooking in front, he was the only chef there. It was an open kitchen. So I would sit on the counter and I can watch him make everything out of that one burner and watch him interact and serve the food. It was very exciting to me. The smells, the textures, just the atmosphere, everything. However, given all of that, I didn't actually plan out to be a chef or own a restaurant. All throughout my childhood and even up until college, I actually thought I was going to go become a doctor or become a lawyer because it was very typical Chinese family dream. They immigrate here, they open the restaurant as a means to survival, as a way to support me and give me better opportunities so I don't have to work as hard as they do to put food on the table. And so they wanted me to go be a doctor, be a lawyer. And once I went, and also another reason why I didn't want to do it was because I wanted a normal 9-to-5 job. I'm like, no, I don't want to, miss birthdays and holidays. I don't want to work here every day. I want to hang out with my friends. I want to sit around a dinner table and eat dinner with my kids at 6 p.m., not work until 11 p.m., go home and have dinner and be super exhausted. Fast forward all the way till college, I ended up going into the corporate world. I worked at Merrill Lynch, Neutrogena, and did operations there. I had this aha moment where I came home bringing a bag of these goodie products. They call it goodie bags. Each month you get a goodie bag made up of defective products from Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson's the parent company. And when I say defective, doesn't mean there's something wrong with the product. It's like mislabeled or there's something wrong with the pump, so they can't sell it. And that was the one thing that I was excited about with my job. Wow. Like that was a big problem, right? I wasn't excited to work there. It wasn't inspiring. It felt like the same thing all the time. And the one thing that I would be happy about is coming back home with a bag of defective products that I can't use myself. There'd be like 50 products in there that I end up giving away to other people. So I'm like, there is something wrong here. And I remember coming back, talking to my roommates and being like, I can't do this. This cannot be my future. And I don't know where to go from here, right? Like, okay, like, what do I do? And the one thing that I love doing is cooking and entertaining. I spent 80% of my time on that. Like, why am I not doing that? My family's in it. So I called my parents. I was like, So I think I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to come and work at the restaurant, move back in with you guys. And that's how it started everything.
I love that story. What was your parents' reaction? How did they react to that big change?
I think there too, like the initial reaction with my dad was like surprise. And also he was very skeptical. He spent all this money
It's cool.
for my education at USC to study business. And I moved away for basically 5 years. And I come back and say, I don't want to do any of that. It's like wasted money and time. And so he's like, and you want to come back to our restaurant and work? So he didn't know if I was fully committed to wanting to do restaurant stuff. He thought I was just trying to find something in between. But anyhow, there was also a part of him that I think he was happy about because one, he's getting his daughter back home. And the other thing is, I think that my dad never really talked to me very much about sort of the what's going to happen if, like, let's say they don't want to do it anymore, right? Like, what's the succession plan? He never talked about it because he never wanted to give me pressure to say, you must take over this restaurant because this is very hard. And if I don't want to do it and he gave it to me, I would still not do a good job, right? Like in his mind, the perfect person would be someone who wants to do it, who's good at it, has talent, grit, and everything. If those things are not there, even if he gave it to me because I'm the daughter, it would be a waste. I would, in his words, like drive it through the ground, right? Like destroy. He's like, I'd rather just like not. I'd rather just close it. That's why
you started with low expectations.
So, so he never talked about succession plans, but that's always been in the back of his mind. What's going to happen? We have created something very special here. And he said it would be really sad if House of Nanking one day wouldn't be around. So I think deep down, he was like, okay, like, I know she's really good at like cooking. She's really into food. Now it's more like, is she committed enough? Like, is she going to do this and then, go off and do something else? Because right now my track record's not very good. I've jumped from 2 jobs and it's like, nope, I don't want to do that.
Okay. So what do you find inspiring about food and cooking, and what gets you going? I do have to say, I checked your Instagram and it made me hungry. And I was like, I know where I'm going when I go to San Francisco for good Chinese food, but like, tell me, like, what gets you going? What gets you excited about your day? How is this different than the prior experience that you had with your job that was just going through the motion?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many aspects of this job that I find really exciting. Obviously, like the most, like the biggest one is the ability to create, right? To be creative, to keep things different. I would be bored if I was cooking the same thing or serving the same thing every single day for years. So I like the excitement of going into the kitchen and experimenting and creating things and seeing reactions from people. And the ultimate is when I create something and I see customers giving that, like, oh my God, that is the reaction that I go for. I don't want someone to eat and be like, oh, that was good. I want someone to be eating and talking and they're like, oh, like they stop in that moment and they point. Like, I don't have to be by the table. I can be anywhere. And that's what I look for. And when I see that, I know, I'm like, okay, that made my day. That's why I love like creating dishes at the restaurant and serving people. So that's number one. Number two is I'm actually a little atypical. Like, yes, I'm the executive chef, but I don't actually cook all the time. I cook to create dishes. I cook when the kitchen needs my help, but I spend probably 60 to 70% of my time in the front of the house. That's sort of my dad's style too. We talk to the customers. We like to order for them. It's kind of got that homey experience. You come in, we're like, we'll take care of you. We have people who've seen us since I was a kid, or from our other restaurant who then now come to Fang, who've known me for over 20 years. We have people who come on the regular, literally like 5 times a week. And so there's this kind of home feeling for me and the ability to connect with people all the time, right? Like in what job can I choose where I'm constantly meeting new people? I met my husband at the restaurant, my best friend at the restaurant, like pretty much everybody that I know came from the restaurant.
That's your
So
life, the center of
yeah,
your.
I mean, those are the things that I think are like what makes me excited to go to work.
Talk about from an entrepreneurship perspective, the hard times. How do you deal with those? And like starting a restaurant, I know that's a huge undertaking, starting a new brand, right? Even though you have the family history of running a restaurant. Talk about how that has been for you, and you have a family too, right? So it's a balancing act. Talk a little bit about that.
So I'll probably start with the experience I had going into it. You know, when I first opened Fang with my dad back in 2009, it was actually probably the worst time to open because it was right during the Great Recession. And Fang is actually located in Soma, which is, you know, the big tech hub area, financial district. And so that area was a complete ghost town. And at that point, we couldn't really back out because this process was, you know, a 2 to 3 year process. Before the recession even hit, we started working on it and doing construction and building and doing everything. And at that point, you're like, well, you know, we have to do this. We can't change what's happening around us. We just have to remember that we'll be able to do this. And that first couple of months was incredibly hard for me. I would say that I felt an immense amount of guilt at that time for, you know, even pushing to do something like this, because my dad was very comfortable with having his one restaurant. And here I am being like, we got to open another place. And my dad partnered with me. You know, this is truly a family venture. There's no other investors. There's no partners. There's nobody. It's just my dad and I. And this is all hard-earned money that I grew up watching them make and save to open something that is 5 times larger than what we have was a huge risk, very, very big risk. And so that first couple of months being someone who's like, well, I came out of business school. I know how to solve this. Nothing that I actually learned from business school really helped me. And that was very hard at that time. And the one thing that I think really actually made it okay for us, where, you know, we stuck together, my dad and I, we had several conversations about this, obviously. And the one thing that I think was very helpful was the fact that we have the experience of House of Making, and we know the philosophy of it. So if we stick to what we believe would create the right business, then we can actually survive. So what that was for us was, we are going to provide our customers incredible food at an affordable price that's approachable. Those are our 3 pillars for our business model. As long as the city doesn't burn down, people will eventually come back. And once they do, we're going to make sure we keep those people. And then that will grow the business more and more. And so we basically stuck with what we believed in, like our core values and themes of why our business will do well, why we opened this place in the first place. And we just waited it out. And you also have to be be smart about it, right? Like there needs to be business sense of, okay, we're open 7 days. Right now, Monday and Tuesday are not good days. Close those days, open the other, make use of what you think will work and not work, and just hold out. If you fight and you persevere, then you'll see you have to focus on what you think creates the right business. And that's kind of what pushed us through, because you could go down a rabbit hole, right? Oh my God, what are we going to do? Let's change this. Now, we didn't change anything. We basically said, we're sticking with what we're doing. It's the timing. The timing is just not right.
Well, I firmly believe there is always a lesson for us to learn. And I think you had that vision and that heart-driven, desire to see your business grow. So congrats on that, because That's why many businesses don't make it, right? Because it's hard to build a business from scratch. So congrats to you and having that vision and inspiration. Tell us a little bit about the food. What inspires you when you're preparing the meals that you talked about, the one that takes the customer's breath away and stops their, conversation? What inspires you? Like, what are the flavors? If I were to taste them, smell them now, tell me a little bit about that.
So for me, travel inspires my creativity, right? Travels and eating out, but more than anything, I feel like it's the travel. The travel aspect allows me to taste food from many different backgrounds, different cuisines. And it also allows me to meet like different cultures. And food is all about like connection, right? Like if you taste something, a lot of times people enjoy something because it reminds them of something or something that they grew up with, or something that's like, oh, the soup is obviously, wonton soup, and I grew up with chicken noodle soup. But I'm just giving you an example. But someone could say, but there's something about the flavors here and how comforting, or how the noodles are in this wonton soup, that reminds me of the soup I used to have with my grandmother. It's all about these connections. And we don't serve just Chinese people, right? We serve people from all over the world. So for me to be able to create food that's enjoyable for people who are all over the world, which is kind of the demographic of San Francisco and tourists, it's better that I can do research and know what those flavors are like. Then I feel like I can create in a more global sense, come at it very differently than just one sort of direction, if that makes sense, right? Because I can't be creative with Chinese food if all I eat is Chinese food and that's all I know, right? Then it's like, how do I color outside the lines? I have to go be like, oh my God, well, there's magenta out there. All I knew was the green, yellow, and orange. And there's violet here and turquoise. So those are the things that are inspiring. And a lot of times you'll find commonalities, right? Like, sure, I might go somewhere in Eastern Europe or go someone to like the Middle East, but like we all have rice, right? And then it's like, how do we prepare rice, and what's the seasoning like, and how is that different, and how is it common? And so there's actually a dish that I've done before, because I had this Persian dish where it's like this crispy rice, and they incorporate a lot of like raw onions and tomatoes and fresh herbs, and sumac, it's got like this tartness to it. So I created this rice salad where it was like warm rice with puffed rice that was crispy, that then had the elements of fresh herbs like cilantros and scallions, but I put ginger and tomato, lemon, chili oil, sesame oil. So it was almost like a little marriage between the two of like Asian and Persian culture in one dish. But that's basically what inspires me, is really the travel, and how do I bring flavors together that sometimes people can say, oh my God, I've never had anything like this before, but it reminds me of like one of our home dishes. That's one thing. And the other thing for me is just like flavor, right? Like I'm big on flavor. I'm not as big on like how something necessarily needs to look, like how refined it is. I'm all about like, as soon as it touches your mouth and your tongue, it needs to create a reaction. If it doesn't, then I'm like, it's good, but it's not good enough.
You want the awe effect.
Yes, that's what I want for.
So tell us a little bit about the show. What got you to do TV show?
So the show actually happened very randomly. When I opened the restaurant back in 2009, a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, you're the chef. I was 27 at the time. And clearly I like to talk about food. I'm pretty social. I spend a lot of time, like I said, front of the house. So they're like, oh, that's like very atypical for chefs. Usually they hide in the back. And, you seem to be well-spoken. So they're like, have you ever thought about being on food television? I'm like, no, but I grew up watching, Giada De Laurentiis and all these people on the Food Network. So I'm like, if I were to think about that and be like, yeah, I would love to do a stand-in stir. I would love to teach people how to cook Asian food or Chinese food. And so I started pitching that. But at the time, there was really not a ton of like Asian representation on TV or media, just in general. And I got a lot of pushback on, well, the stand and stir format is not really popular anymore. All the networks are trying to move away from that. And this is when they started doing a lot of food competitions. And they're like, that's the new format. That's the hot format. And then the other thing that I got pushback on was Asian food and Chinese food is a little too exotic for, America. I'm like, it's the most popular cuisine. There's more Chinese restaurants than there are like McDonald's, Taco Bell combined. But like those stats, like that, none of that mattered to them. It was like, people don't get that excited or want to learn that stuff because it's too foreign to them. Like it's better if it's things like burgers and barbecues and tacos, because that's an easier sell. So I think the concept was too much of a risk. And I think sometimes media companies can be, I don't want to say dinosaurs, but it's like, if something works, then we stick with it, right? We don't want to go and take too many risks and go do too many things that's out there. So I decided to not pitch that anymore. I started to do some food competitions and went on Chopped and won that twice, and been on a couple other television stuff with food and the Today Show. And that was fun and I enjoyed it. But I pretty much kind of wrote off this whole like, create a stand and stir. I'm like, not going to happen. Then I got married and had kids. I'm like, well, like now I don't know where I'm going to find the time to do this. It's just not going to happen. I guess rewind back to when I had my second child during the pandemic. I then get an email, like a cold email from this producer in LA who's like, I found you online and I think your story is incredible. Can I hop on a Zoom and talk to you? And I have to preface that I have had people approach me before about wanting to create a reality show, but it was always not really necessarily focused on the restaurant or the business. It was like, oh, we want to do like a female entrepreneur thing with people in the Bay Area. It didn't work out. Then there was something about, Asian females, and that didn't really work out. So it was like those concepts never like really worked. And this guy here finds me online, didn't know me prior, spoke to me on Zoom for about an hour, and then used that content plus other content that I had online already and sold the whole show. He created a 2-minute sizzle. It's like an elevator pitch, right? And sold it to various networks. Food Network ended up being one of the bidders. And that was a no-brainer to me, right? I'm like, of course, I'm going to go with them over any network, no offense, but like food is where I want to be. So they came out and shot the pilot, and the pilot got sold into a full series. And so that's how we ended up doing. Never have I ever been like, I want to be on a reality show or docuseries. I don't think my life is that interesting. When I think reality series, I think of really big personalities, people, sabotaging each other and like create like real drama. And I'm like, I'm the opposite of someone who's incredibly dramatic. In fact, most of the time I'm kind of like just very even keeled. They're like, my husband's like, you're not going to be interesting on, like, they want big personalities. It's like, I don't know. Maybe it's like going to be about food and family. Like, I can do that. That's me.
That is funny. You said your son said that? Is that what you said?
My husband.
Oh, your husband. Okay.
My husband. Yeah. My son is 2.5.
I was like, well,
that would be funny if he did. Like, Mom.
So, Chef Kathy, outside of the show, which I assume is a big deal, I'll just assume that, do you have any other exciting projects that are in the works now or that you're working on?
Yeah, so I have 2 things that I really, really want to actually do almost like right away. Now that all of the stuff is in motion, it's one of them actually I've been wanting to do for a while, but never really. It's like it takes time, and now is, I think, the best time writing on the show. I've always wanted to do a cookbook with my dad. And it would be something that's very, like, I did a cookbook, but it's very general, like easy Asian cooking. But this would be a very personal piece for me, because it would actually not only cover sort of the story and the history and the background of, one, how the restaurant got started, but also like, how did my dad become sort of the chef that he became, touch upon a little bit of his upbringing, because that kind of defines and creates the person and the chef that you are, right? So it'd be kind of interesting to see, oh, how I became that chef growing up at the restaurant, stories about that, me growing up there, my dad, and creating this generational piece, and then having recipes get woven into it. So recipes that my dad grew up eating, that really is what inspired him to become a chef, even though, just like me, in his mind was like, I'm not going to be a chef. I'm going to move to America. And also he thought he was going to have an office job and go to university. That didn't work, because he got stuck in the rat race and was like, I can't make enough money to even go to school and pay the bills. Right. But it would, like, I would love to be able to share, because he's always talking to me about what he grew up eating, the pork chop, where he says he can't even find anymore, even if he went back to Shanghai, stuff that his mom used to make, that his uncle used to make, all these little recipes that are going to go away, that are going to be lost. Right. And then the recipes that I grew up eating, that my grandmother used to make me, or that my dad used to make me at the restaurant, a lot of them my dad was starting to forget, right? I'd be like, do you remember that sizzling black bean salmon you used to make? He's like, oh, and I was like, and that was in there. He's like, oh, that's right. Oh, it's been 34 years. There's lots of classics that even House of Nanking had that I grew up with, that I haven't seen in 15 years. Like, I'm pretty sure my dad has kind of forgotten how to make a lot of them. Luckily, I was around to pay attention. And then pull that whole piece to like what I make my kids. So you see almost like 3 generations into it.
That's so great.
So yeah, that would be one. And I like need to do that now before my dad like starts to forget like everything, although he's very sharp now. And we've talked about it, but it's always like, oh, well, it takes time, right? When am I going to find the time? You got to sit down and think and write. I think now is the time. And then in tying with that, I also think it would be really neat, because I have 2 kids now, and it's really important for me to have them grow up around Chinese food and Chinese culture. I was thrown into it because we had no choice. I was in Chinatown. I was born in Chinatown. I was in the restaurant. If I'm not in the restaurant, I'm in the streets of Chinatown, at the supermarkets, doing all the things that my dad was doing. Now, because we've established a decent level of success, we have nannies, right? And they go to school. They don't have to hang out at the restaurant, even though they probably should. But they're home, and we got to make sure they're taken care of and healthy and eating all this stuff. So how are they going to absorb this culture? I'd love to create like a little not a cookbook, but like a little kids book series that kind of follows how the character, like myself, someone like me, growing up in a restaurant in Chinatown and experiencing those cultural things through it, so that it can be digestible and they can learn it at a young age. Of course, I'm going to bring them on these experiences, but I don't feel like every kid is going to have that. And it'd be neat to have that in different cultural contexts. Like, it could be for someone who's like Chinese, it could be someone who's, Hispanic, it could be someone from all these different backgrounds, right? Like, how to experience these different cultures in their neighborhoods. It's something that I think is important for like young kids now to like grow up around.
Yeah.
So those are the immediate things that I want to do.
Ultimately, project.
Those are like the urgent ones, because my kids are getting old, they grow just like that. So I need that. There's like a small window. And then also my dad's getting older. So it's like his memory is going to be fresher if we do it sooner. And then the long-standing goal is I ultimately, like the show talks about expansion. And in my mind, I think it's not really necessarily going and opening a bunch of our restaurants, creating a chain. I don't actually think that is what we want to ultimately create. I think what we would love to do is create an extension of the Fang family brand brought into your home, because our number one thing is people constantly tell us, oh my God, please come open in Minnesota. Please come open in like Texas. People will call and be like, even today, someone was like, come to Hawaii. We don't have food like this. And I feel bad a lot of the times because we're like, well, we want to, but the business is so personal to us. We're always there. Like, how do we do that? How do we grow and open a bunch of them and be able to create that same feeling? There's not 10 of us, there's not 15 of us. So it almost kind of loses that. And so like the show kind of covers the process of like trying to figure out, what does that mean? Like, I don't want to just sit on these 2 restaurants. I don't want to waste that. I think that we have something special here. So many people from all over the world come and say, this is like the best Chinese food we've ever had. We're not super, super fancy. We're not Michelin. We're not James. We're not any of that. But what I can say is our food is good enough for probably 70% of like the demographic. And that says a lot. It's not for 10% of people who are super fancy and they understand. It's like a lot of people can. So how can we like bring it to other people, and people will be like, can I buy this sauce from you? Like, or send me an email and be like, can you please tell me how to make it? I'm like, I don't know if we can share all our secrets. Because my dad would be like, what did you do? So then I'm like, the thing that makes the most sense is bringing that Fang flavor into your home. That means sauces, that means like cookware, plateware, anything that evokes that kind of family Fang feel to it. So you can go to your local store or online and replicate that dish using our sauces or plates that we designed. That's like very near and dear to our family.
Okay, I'll be looking for that.
Yeah.
So tell me, you talk about flavors. When our readers come into the restaurant, what is the one dish we have to try?
Okay, so the first one is going to be the Fang's famous buns. This is a pork belly bun that there's like kind of an interesting story. I created this idea of like a burger bun when we first opened Fang Restaurant, and it flopped because I overthought it. I was like, I'm going to make the pork belly bun became famous from Momofuku. I'm like, I'm going to make like a burger version of it, like bigger. And I put like all these different slaws on it. And like, we're going to do this whole thing with like chicken and fish. And it was just too much. People thought it like had too many flavors in it. It flopped. Then I was like, okay, fine. We'll turn it into like this little appetizer. But I wasn't happy with it. And I started putting all these different renditions on it. I did an event for this company who was like, I want to do a pairing with your bun and whiskey. And this idea popped up in my mind, and I created a recipe for this pork belly braise with whiskey. And now this is our one of our best-selling appetizers. People come in and they're like, I just want the buns, or they're like, my husband be like, I love your wife's buns. Like, so they're famous. People, I have kids who come in and we have different versions, like tofu ones, people who are like vegetarian. They'll be like, I'm just coming in for 2 orders of buns. I'm like, there's 8, that's 8 pieces. And they're like, yeah, that's all we want. So the buns for sure. It comes with these pickled vegetables that reminds me of like a banh mi. So there's like chili oil, our secret sauce, like a crispy pork, chicken, or tofu, and then that soft, luscious bun. The other dish now that I would say people are always talking about is the Fang's crispy honey chili short rib. Okay. This people have called beef brownie. It's like this super tender beef that has this 5-spice crust on the outside that's sweet and spicy, super tender. People are just like, never had anything like this before. And it's paired with bok choy. And this dish also has a really unique backstory. This dish was created from all three of us. So my mom, my dad, and I. It started with my mom. She decided to cook the short rib a certain way one day. I went over to House of Inking. I tried it. I was like, oh, this is really good. What did you do with it? She told me. Then I was like, it's a little dry though. So I created a sauce and then I sauteed it, served it at Fang, just not on the menu, just randomly with customers, and started seeing people were like, if you saw that aha kind of thing. Then my dad started noticing because I started doing a lot of it. And he was like, what's going on with this dish? He tries it and he's like, this is good, but I would change the vegetable. So at the time I did it with green beans and he changed it to bok choy. And the bok choy that we have is one of our best-selling vegetable dishes. He took like one of our best-selling dishes and paired it with this beef, which has now become our best-selling dish. So it took the three of us to create this dish.
It's a truly family recipe.
Yes. And the last one is the charred garlic broccoli. This sounds very normal, unassuming, but this is something that I created that my dad initially like hated. He was like, this is the exact opposite of how you should treat vegetables in Chinese cooking, right? We don't char vegetables. That means it's overcooked and it's burnt. And he's like, and it's ugly. He's like, it's so ugly. He's like, vegetables need to be green. It needs to have a pop. And so it was very hard to put this on the menu. So much so that when I did and started selling it, my dad came up to me and was like, I think I'm gonna, suggest to you a different way of preparing the broccoli. He's like, the sauce is great, but what we should do is we should blanch it. I'm like, blanch it? I'm like, it's a charred broccoli. Why would you, like, it's not charred anymore. You're completely like, he's like, but it's just like, he kept trying, he's like, but it's just the color. He's like, it's so ugly. Like, nobody wants to eat this. And I'm like, no, that's not it. Like, anyhow, then he started seeing, he's like, yeah, there's something about the broccoli. He's like, it's still not my favorite, not my thing, but he's like, people like the broccoli.
It's interesting to see the generational views, right? The different generations, how they view food and the way he thinks vegetables should look like versus what you're thinking of, right?
I know. And the thing is like, it's like my dad, I think like several years back, a lot of it was like taste, and taste is still a big thing. But as he's gotten older, I think he's just he craves like more traditional stuff. It's all about, oh, back in the day. And this is what it should be. It's just, it comes with age, I think. So
relating to the good old days.
Yes.
Yes. Very good. So if you were to give an advice to a chef or to a restaurateur, what would that advice be?
I feel like there's so many.
Go for it.
I'll probably go with like maybe 2 or 3. One of them, I would say, is set boundaries and find work balance. I think that there's been a lot of, I guess, bad rap from the last 10, 20, 30 years that's been built up around how bad working in the restaurant industry is. And it's very bad. But the experience that I had is quite different because, I never actually went and worked at any other restaurant, which is also atypical. I grew up in my family's restaurant, right? And it wasn't until I was 25 when I was like, I want to do this. And I learned everything from my dad. It only made sense for me to partner and work with him. But I was very lucky in that I have a family business. And so the work conditions, although is very tough, right? Long hours, it's hard on your body. You get all sorts of stuff like that wouldn't normally happen if you had like, say, an office job or a desk job. It's very hard on your body. And it's very hard to find work balance too, because you don't have dinners, right? You work till really late. Whatever time you eat is never normal. So it's hard to be healthy. And people in the industry oftentimes go like the wayside, right? They go to other things that are not good for them. I didn't have that kind of environment, but that's because we created the environment that we wanted. And it's definitely doable, right? My dad was able to do it with his wife, husband-wife team. I've been able to do it with my dad as a father-daughter team. And so I think for young chefs, you have to kind of set those boundaries and determine like, hey, what kind of work environment am I okay with and not okay with? And I think there are many restaurants out there that have great ones, and there are many ones that are not. So it's not like you have to pay your dues type of thing. I don't think it needs to be that way. It doesn't need to be like, oh, well, you need to deal with shit or crap for 10 years before you can make it. You need people to berate you and abuse you and all that stuff. I don't think that's the case. So I think it's good for chefs to set those boundaries early on, so you can find happiness and success in what you do. Otherwise, I don't think you can. The other thing I would say is it's also part of the setting boundaries thing. It's knowing when to say no. Because we're in the service industry, I think a lot of it always surrounds itself on the customer is always right. You don't have an opinion or a voice, because if you do, it could destroy your business. We always feel like we're kind of at the mercy of the reviewers, the customers, of Yelp, of all these things. And if you were to fight back, they would like not ban you, but they'd be like, oh, no, nobody go there ever again. And I don't think that's the case. When I first started out, I would read Yelp like crazy, and it was not healthy. When I learned that my dad discovered Yelp, I was like, oh my God. I was like, don't read it. Don't even look into it. Like, please stop. And then, initially my dad got like kind of into it, and he'd be like, what's going on? And then after a while, my dad's like, whatever, right? And then I also learned to do that, because if you go down that rabbit hole, then you realize like you can't make everybody happy. And what are you going to respond to everybody and argue with them or fight with them? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So it's just like, know when to say no, know also when to, like, if you deal with people like that in person, to just be like, hey, I'm sorry. I used to apologize, even if we were not wrong. Be like, I'm sorry, even though we weren't wrong, or if they were crazy or outrageous, we would be like, always like, okay, our fault kind of thing. And now I've learned, like, you can apologize for the experience not being what you expected, but we stand by like our thoughts on it, and you can always go somewhere else. You don't have to come here. We're not forcing you to come here. I think
mentally, a big deal.
Yeah, but mentally, I think that is helpful. I think it's also like, if you can make sure you grow a thick skin during this whole process, it ties in with that, right? If you can stand up, grow a thick skin, and realize that because you're in this industry, you're going to receive criticism. People are going to love you. People are going to hate you. People love to talk. And especially nowadays, there are trolls, there's all sorts of people. You just have to stick with what you're doing, believe in that, and everything else is like white noise.
So, and that takes me to 5 quick things that you would tell anybody considering starting a restaurant.
5 quick things considering starting a restaurant. Research, a lot of research. I think sometimes when people think of opening a restaurant as a chef, that they think everything is about like the food. And yes, of course, that's number one. But running a successful restaurant is not just about food. Like, you have to have like business savvy. You need to know how to run a business. There's numbers, there's accounting, there's everything. So that's one. 2, like I said, the research aspect, research the area, the demographic. Is there a need for what you're looking for? Like, sure, maybe you have a winning, concept that would wow people in New York. But if you open it in Wichita, Kansas, then like it's not for the right demographic. So, a square piece may not fit in like all these other shapes, and restaurants are like that, like understanding the concept that you're creating. Does it serve the area that you're servicing? Because if it doesn't, and you do it, the problem is sometimes they think that it wasn't that they were in the wrong place or it wasn't the right concept. They start doubting like, oh, what they created as an artist. And a lot of it is about where the placement, like where this needs to be. So that's another thing to think about. And then I would probably say you need a really good business partner if you're just a chef. Right? If you're just a chef, realizing what your strengths and weaknesses are. You could say, well, I want to do it all myself. Okay, if you think that you can run a business successfully, be a chef, manage people, if you think you can do all those things, then that's great. But opening a restaurant is a lot of work. And if it's your first time doing it as a chef, it's probably good to partner up with somebody who can fill up the weaknesses that you have. Realize that you're not perfect, that you can't do it all.
Do it all.
And you need a good team. And so find that right person and be really good at vetting who that person is going to be. Because a lot of times I've also seen people fail because they partnered up with the wrong person, right? And the whole thing goes to crap. And a lot of times it's sad because it's not because of the chef themselves or their ability or their talent.
Okay.
Sometimes it's the wrong pairing. Yeah.
Teamwork makes a difference in any business and any industry. So I imagine that you have the mix of customers on top of that, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Very good. Well, Chef Kathy, it has been an incredible pleasure talking to you. Thank you for all the inspiration and stories and vulnerability that you shared with our readers. And I wish you continued success.
I have one more. Have fun.
Yeah.
Remember to have fun, because at the end of the day, what we're doing, I feel like it's only sustainable and manageable if it's fun to you, like at the end of the day, right? We do it because we love it, but if it stops becoming fun, and then what's the point, right? It's like, it can't be, yes. I enjoy going to work, even though it's a lot of work. I feel like it's a break from taking care of my kids. Like,
work.
Yeah.
So tell us, when people want to, where can people find you? What's the best way to find you? Follow your journey, come visit the restaurant.
They can go on my Instagram, which is Chef Kathy Fang. They can go onto my Facebook, which is also Chef Kathy Fang. And then they can watch me on television or come to Fang Restaurant and see me.
Share the address for those people who are local. You can come visit.
Yes, perfect. The address is 660 Howard Street. We're located right in Soma, next to the Moscone Center and the SF Modern Museum.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I wish you the very best of luck in all the projects that you're doing.
Thank you. This is so much fun. And hopefully you can also at some point make it out here. Absolutely. And try our buns and our broccoli.
All the recommended dishes. Can't get enough of those rebellious conversations? Do make sure you subscribe, like, and share with your friends.